In this video, we're going to talk about something, an important decision that you need to make as you're going through this process, and that is choosing the best website hosting for your WordPress website. Now, there's tons and tons of website hosts out there, and everybody has positive or bad reviews about all of them. So it can be tough to kind of navigate through them and figure out what it is that you need and what's the right price that you should be paying. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about things that we want to avoid, and then I'm going to get into the companies that we recommend for hosting. So if you don't care about the why and you just want to get to, which host should I pick, I'll put some kind of timestamp on the screen so you can jump right to that point. But if you do want to learn a little bit about, what you should be looking for, then just follow along. So the first thing that I want to talk about is shared hosting or the budget hosting that is available by some of the largest companies in the world. Some of the largest companies in the world are selling terrible hosting with terrible service, and it can really ruin a business, because not only does it open your website up to being hacked and having insecure websites out there, having troubles with SEO and marketing, but also just page speed. I mean, as you're going along through your websites, when you're researching something or looking to buy something, if you go to a website and it takes more than maybe 2 seconds to load up, you're going to hit that back button, go back to your search results and go to the next item. People don't want to wait anymore. And so very fast loading websites are very important nowadays. So no matter what content you're showing, we want it to load up quickly. But that's not the only problem with shared hosting. And like I said, I'm not going to mention the company names, but these are very well-known companies. You've probably already stumbled across them as you were getting into this. And they sell, budget or shared hosting for sometimes $2 or $3 or surprisingly, even sometimes like $15 or $20 per month, even though it's awful. And they get people to sign up for them by promising two things: unlimited disk space and unlimited bandwidth. So disk space being the amount of files that you can have, or the storage capacity of your website, and the second, bandwidth, being the amount of traffic flow that your website can get. So this is, the amount of people that visit your website, and as they visit them, they are downloading the files and the text or whatever, and that takes certain, creates certain bytes of information that are used, and that is all calculated as bandwidth. And they say it's completely unlimited. But that's a bit of a play on a phrase, because they don't actually mean that the amount of bandwidth and space that you can use are unlimited. It means that they're not going to put limits on the amount of bandwidth and disk space that you use. Obviously we're talking about computers, and so there's things like virtual space. It's easy to create more, availability, but everything is finite at the end. And so, think of yourselves, shared hosting or budget hosting that you're paying for. It's kind of like renting a room in a house. So that room is yours and you can do whatever you want with it. And if the landlord says you can have as many people over as you want, nobody's going to say anything, and you say, okay, well, that's great. But if you're the guy who's renting the room downstairs has 100 people over in the house, they're not going to walk into your room, but that's going to make it pretty difficult for you to operate and do what you're doing. And that's kind of the shared hosting. It's usually also on very outdated software, things like, cPanel and these other things that have, very large security risks if they're not used by, professionals. The software itself is all right, but because it's aimed at new users, and new users aren't necessarily doing all the things they should be doing, I can't tell hundreds and hundreds of websites that I've been called in to fix, and I found out that the problem was, usually due to a combination of shared hosting, bad software, and people who weren't necessarily up to date on how to keep their website, secure and fast. So my main point of this little speech is that don't be drawn in by people who by hosting companies that make huge promises for these very low prices. Hosting, doesn't necessarily, mean that it should be cheap. When we're purchasing hosting, it's essentially like renting office space. It's not going to be as expensive as office space, but you wouldn't pay $2 or $3 a month to rent office space. So ours is virtual, so it's going to be cheaper, but cheapest, even if you're on a budget, hosting is not necessarily the place where we want to cut costs. We can cut costs by learning how to build websites ourselves, and that's going to save us a ton of money. We want to put the money where it's going to be the most beneficial to us. So if you don't have a huge budget, but you need a website, don't cut at the hosting, because that's going to hurt your business later on. So shared hosting, it tends to be very insecure. If you're another website on your shared hosting, it gets a boom, a huge boom of traffic, your website can tend to go out just as fast as theirs is. And if you yourself, let's say you get posted on Reddit, or your marketing campaign is successful, and all of a sudden you have 10,000 people rushing to your website's going to crash, and that's it. That's the end of your business. And so we want to make sure not to get drawn in by promises. If our intent is to be successful with our business and successful with our website, we need to make sure that our infrastructure is going to be able to handle that. And there's a couple different options. I know not everybody is rich, and so I tried to narrow it down. There's a lot of great hosts out there, and unfortunately we can't cover all of them because I didn't want to overwhelm you with options. So I tried to narrow it down to a few of the best WordPress specific hosts out there, because we want to have people who are hosting us who understand our specific platform. They're not building a host or an infrastructure for everybody. They're building an infrastructure for WordPress websites, because that's what our network is going to be based around. So I've narrowed it down to 3 options. Kind of a developer's dream, a standard great WordPress host, for smaller businesses and things like that, or people who are just getting started, and the best, just the absolute best option. So we're going to talk about those now. We're going to talk about Pantheon.io, we're going to talk about Flywheel, and we're going to talk about Kinsta. So there's a couple things we want in our WordPress hosts. We want them to help us manage our WordPress updates, so that, one of the most important thing with a WordPress website is keeping that website up to date at all times. That's very easy to do, but sometimes we can miss it, and we want to make sure that our host is going to help remind us of that, or in some cases do it for us. We want to make sure that the hosting is incredibly fast and loads incredibly fast. And one of the biggest things with WordPress websites is 2 things. One of them is caching, and I'll go into what that is in a minute, and also security, right? So caching has to do with performance. We don't, you're not usually making a ton of updates to your website, every minute. You might add blogs or articles or add content to it, but the pages and things like that usually stay pretty static. So we don't necessarily need every visitor that comes to our website to load every single image and every single text file every single time. So caching is this idea that we save a copy of our website, because with WordPress, it's in PHP, it's dynamic. So so when you go in to edit a page, you're editing a page in the database, and as the page loads, it's loading a bunch of different things. It's taking your content from the database, it's taking your widgets or your sidebar information, it's pulling that in, maybe it's pulling some information into your footer, it's pulling your logo from here, it's doing that, it's replacing a bunch of things as it loads. And all this is done fairly quickly, but if you have a lot of content or a lot of things going on, it can take some time to make those database calls every time. So we're taking our everything. You're not going to see PHP code, but the system is running on PHP, and it's doing certain functions every single time a page is loaded. But because we're not making constant changes to our website, we don't necessarily need to grab all that information every single time. We can make a copy of the result. So the result is exported HTML and CSS that builds our page and shows all the content. So what we're going to do is we're going to save a copy of that HTML and CSS, or the structure and the design of the site and the content, and we're going to show that copy to the majority of visitors. And every time we make a change on our website and the database is updated, we're going to refresh that copy. We're going to take a new copy. And that's a very basic kind of explanation of caching. Now you can do that with WordPress with different plugins, and there's minification and all these extra things that you can worry about, but wouldn't it be great if your host just did that for you? So the 3 hosts that we're going to talk about are all going to handle your caching for you. You don't need to worry about caching plugins. In fact, you're advised not to install one because it'll interfere with the server level caching that's happening from your host. So all that time that other people have to worry about caching and performance, we're going to throw that out the window, and we're going to save it, and we're going to spend that time learning how to build websites. I will have optional tutorials covering this so that you can learn about it, but we're not going to need to do it for our websites. And I can guarantee you that the results your hosts get doing it at a server level are going to be substantially better than anything you'd be able to do with a plugin anyway. So let's make them handle it. And the same thing when it comes to security. There's WordPress is fairly secure, contrary to what some people say, as long as it's kept updated and we're using real plugins and stuff. And just let me say, don't worry if you don't understand all the terms that I'm talking about or the things I'm referring to. You will know it in a few days or a few hours, depending on how quickly you go through these tutorials. So don't worry too much about it. Just try to grab what you can. So when we're talking about security, the WordPress software and the plugins and the themes that we use, if we're getting those from reputable places, WordPress repository and things like that, as long as we keep that software updated, our websites are going to be fairly secure on their own. Just like with Microsoft, as soon as Microsoft releases an update, hackers can then figure out from the update what the holes in the security were. And that's where most people get their computers hacked. Unless they're clicking download links and doing weird things on the internet, generally when they find a hole, they find it because Microsoft released it. Now, of course, Microsoft has to release it because they can't let insecure desktops be out there. So it's kind of up to the user's responsibility to make sure those Windows updates are always firing. And WordPress is pretty similar to that. So there's going to be a very simple way to update. It's just clicking a button in the back end of WordPress, and all of our software and themes and plugins and core software are going to be updated. But there's a lot of other things that we can do to keep our website secure, such as using proper passwords and stuff like that, which I'll go through you. But on top of that, we want an extra layer of security. We want firewalls. We want certain files locked down. We want things to not be accessible. We want editors in the back end to be disabled. And again, wouldn't it be great if our host just did all of that for us, so we didn't have to worry about installing security plugins? In fact, again, you're advised not to. So I will go over the basic security that you can take as an administrator, showing usernames, strong passwords, limiting login attempts. I will show you all that kind of stuff during our launch tutorials. But the main brunt of security should be handled by our host, and this is another reason why we go for WordPress specific hosts, right? So all three of the hosts that we are going to cover also handle all of our security. So our performance and our security, two of the toughest things that there is to do when we come to building websites and keeping them online and keeping them successful, are going to be handled by somebody else, and it's all included in our hosting cost, so that we can spend our time building our communities, building our content, marketing our websites, and hopefully making a bunch of money, right? So I'm going to go over the three hosts, and I'm going to talk about the benefits of each so that you can kind of make a determination about which one is best for you, all right? And I'll go over kind of the pros and cons of each. So the first one is the one that you've been seeing up on your screen for a while, and that is Pantheon.io. Pantheon started out using focusing on a different CMS called Drupal, and they made an incredible environment for building websites on Drupal, and they've for a while now they've now extended that into WordPress, luckily for everybody in the WordPress community. So Pantheon is kind of a developer's dream, and so this is I would say, if you are going to build a lot of the functionality, or you're going to build the website, or you want to handle the front end, but you are planning on having developers help you, so hiring developers and having them build custom functionality. So you want to save money by doing all the stuff that you're able to do, but when it comes to coding, you're going to bring some people in to build custom functionality, specifically functionality, not so much front end coders and stuff, but functionality. Or you have a friend that's going to be a coder, or if you are yourself going to be learning how to program, and that's why you're learning about WordPress as a first step into getting into programming, then Pantheon might be for you, because it has what we call a repository, or a code repository that tracks changes to your website. So I'm just going to log in quickly so you can see the back end here. So you can see a list of websites here. Obviously, I will block them out. But what I want to show you, if I go into I'll go into the tutorial I used the site I use to create tutorials on one of our themes. And you can see here that I'm getting a notification that there were 500 file changes. And that's kind of what Pantheon does, is it tracks all the changes to your website, and you can commit them to a file repository. So people can make changes, test those changes, and then once they're approved, they can then commit them to the main website. This is also a way to kind of build functionality before it goes to a live site. So if you have a staging site you're constantly working on, and then a live site, which we can do with all of our websites, but this is a way to kind of test different changes and have different branches of our website and commit them into one. So this is a lot more technical than our other hosts, because it's meant specifically for developers, and it gives us some good information, reminders, and we can look up errors that happen on our website. This one doesn't have any, thankfully. And then it also has an interesting thing where it has, most website hosts and the host that we're going to cover, you have a development site or a staging site where you work on and do most of your changes, and then a live site. So our live site is the version that's available for users, and our staging site is where we make changes without interrupting any of the traffic that's on our live site, and then we push changes right to our live site. And we could do that with all three of our hosting, but Pantheon has another one in the middle, which is called Test. And basically what this allows you to do is it allows you to take the information from your live site. So if you have, let's say, a discussion forum, right, or something that's going to be updated regularly with information, we can pull that information from our live site, pull our code or our changes from our development site, and have an environment in the middle, our test site, where we test our new changes with our most up-to-date information. So this, combined with the code repository that's built in, it has a Git repository built in. This is like a really nice environment for developers or people that are going to be learning coding, or that are going to bring in a development team. So if that's you, then take a really good look at Pantheon. Now, when you were just listening to me talk, if your eyes started to glaze over and you started zoning out, or you got distracted by a bumblebee or something, and you were like, oh my God, this is getting really complicated, I'm not going to be able to do this, just let me tell you, it's really not that complicated. Everything that we're going to go through in these tutorials can be done by anybody, regardless of your experience with tech. But as we're going through this, for those people that are more technical, I want to make sure to give them options and stuff like that. So if you didn't understand a large part of that, or I completely lost you, don't worry about it. We're going to go into the some of the other options, and those are more a little bit user friendly when it comes to people who are brand new at this. So please don't worry about it. I just wanted to get the technical parts, or for the technical users, I wanted to get that out of the way. So very quickly, I'll finish up with Pantheon. We've talked about their Git repository that's built in. We've talked that they have a fantastic development environment. If you're going to be having a lot of people working on the website at once, they have great ways to handle that. Now, this Git functionality you can get from other places. So you can, if you like the idea of that, but for whatever reason you don't necessarily want to host on Pantheon, that is available via other services. So talk to your developer about that, because it's a great way, if you are paying people to make changes to your website. It's a very basic way, at least, to kind of gauge how much work they're doing. So that's that. So also we want to talk about caching. Pantheon has varnish caching built in, has multiple types of caching, and they also do security. So we don't have to worry about caching or security with Pantheon. They do that out of the box. And the other benefit being they have this great development environment. So let's talk a little bit about pricing. I'm just going to go to their homepage here, and we're going to go into pricing, and we're going to see here that it starts out at $25 per month. I do want to point out that the $100 level is where the real the strongest caching begins. So there's basic caching or performance enhancing with this $25 a month plan, but the real caching and some of the other great services start out at this $100 per month. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that some of the things that some of the best parts of what I was talking about aren't available until you get to this $100 a month level. The development environment and the Git repository and that stuff is all available here. Also, when it comes to backups, with this $25 per month, you have to take backups manually. They're not taken automatically. You can schedule backups starting at the $100 per month plan. However, one thing I do want to mention is that right now, and the link that you click on if you pick Pantheon will lead you to here, and that is Pantheon for agencies. And it's free to sign up. But as I mentioned, we're going to be building our sites on staging sites. And one of the most amazing things about Pantheon is that you can build your site on their service for free. They give you it's a kind of a varying number, but anywhere between, depending on the account you sign up for the agency's account, and I believe it's 20, but that may be inaccurate, but you get at least a dozen slots for staging sites. So if you're planning on building many sites, or you're just looking for kind of a place to learn before you launch your site, or you're going to be doing something that's going to require you to constantly spin up, like create WordPress websites that you may delete shortly after that, again, or for developers, they do that all the time. This is fantastic. So, and it's not time limited. So as long as this is free, and it currently is, it has been for a while, you can create a lot of staging sites with Pantheon and continue to work on them, and you won't pay them a dime until you're ready for that website to go live. Once that website goes live, then we have to kind of choose our plan. But until we do that, until we're ready for our website to be live, we can use the Pantheon service for free. Now that's fantastic. I would say that if you are planning on just using Pantheon to learn about WordPress and you want kind of an unlimited environment to do that, I would say if you're going to use them that way, that you pay at least on one site, even if you're not going to bring it live, that $25 per month. So if you're going to be running 8, 9, 10 staging sites, or even just one for an extended period of time, at some point, even though the service is free, I would say, throw them that $25 a month for this awesome playground that you get to use to learn. So if that's the cost of your learning environment, just because I wouldn't feel good sending people there, even though it is a free service, but to kind of who have no intention of launching a site, to kind of use this and take advantage of it. But if you are planning on launching the site and you're going to launch with Pantheon, then that's fine. Use it for free until you're ready, and then go for it. And of course, they know people are going to use their service that way, and they're okay with it. But just to kind of throw that out there, Pantheon is a great kind of sandbox and an environment to kind of play around with a bunch of sites, and to kind of test different things. So that's great. I would say even if you're going to host your main sites with another host, you might want to use Pantheon specifically for that as kind of a playground. But again, if you're going to use that, just on one of your sites, throw them $25 a month. That way, they can afford to keep that kind of service going. Because if too many people abuse it, they may stop that. That would be a real shame, because it's a tremendous service for a lot of people. So that's just that. So I would say that when it comes to Pantheon, they are fairly quick when it comes to performance. If you're paying for this $100 a month level, this Redis object caching is fantastic. At this level, it's not as powerful caching. We do have to take backups manually, which can be a pain, but they do have the repository built in and are multiple environments for hosting. So that is Pantheon. Like I said, the developer's dream, or the kind of practice playground, which we can throw out $25 a month for if we're going to be using it extensively. They also have agency pricing, so if you're going to be running a bunch of different sites, it's worth taking a look at that. And they have this agencies program, which, like I said, you should sign up for. So that is Pantheon. That is our first host that we recommend. The second one that we're going to get into is Flywheel, and this is kind of our beginner hosting. It's very easy to use, very easy to set up websites. It has a great entry-level pricing, and again, they take care of caching, they take care of security, they also take care of backups automatically for you. Their support is great. So is Pantheon's, by the way. Pantheon has great support, but Flywheel support's also very great. They've taken care of all the issues that I've had right away. Part of the cool thing about Flywheel as well is that they have a setup that integrates with Let's Encrypt. So what Let's Encrypt is it provides free SSL certificates. What is an SSL certificate? without getting into full details, it's kind of a security barrier that makes sure that any information transferred between your users and you is done securely. It also helps with Google PageRank or search result PageRank, and it helps your customers feel more secure about using your website or buying it if they see that green padlock and that HTTPS. That's how we get that, and that's pretty much mandatory for websites. Even if you're not selling anything, even if you're just doing a marketing site, we want to have that HTTPS. And with Flywheel, it's just a couple seconds to set it up, and it's absolutely free. So that's a nice thing about Flywheel, as well as Kinsta. They are tied into Let's Encrypt, and you can get that SSL certificate right away. So they take care of performance, they take care of caching, they take care of backups, they take care of security, and they help us get an SSL certificate. It's very, very easy to deploy a new website. It just takes a couple minutes. They install it for you, they set it up for you. And I'll just kind of show you really quick. I will log into the dashboard. So you can see I have my sites listed here. I can quickly create a new site just by clicking this button. I fill out a form, and a couple minutes later, my WordPress install is set up. So that's kind of how this works. And also, the thing about Flywheel is it doesn't have our unlimited sandbox websites like Pantheon does, but it does allow us to do two things. First is we can have our website staging site free for 2 weeks, so we don't have to pay anything for the first 14 days, which I guarantee you is plenty of time to build a website. Even if it has complex functionality, 14 days is plenty of time. You don't even have to spend every day. You should be able to build a website with our tutorials in less than a week, maybe a couple days extra if you spend some additional time on design or if you have some really complex functionality, but really it shouldn't take more than that. So 2 weeks is plenty of time, and it also allows you to let somebody else take over the billing once you're done. So if you're building a website for somebody else or a client or whatever, for whatever reason, you can then transfer it over to them, and not only do you get the 2 weeks free, when you transfer to them, you'll also get a commission from Flywheel. They throw you a couple dollars for helping them essentially bring on a new client because you've recommended their service by transferring over to them. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's talk about pricing a little bit. So it starts out at $14 a month. There must be some sort of sale going on because normally it's $15. Maybe they changed it. It's $14 a month to start out, then $28 a month for the standard plan. So which one of these is best for you? They both come with all the services I talked about, but with the tiny package, you only get one version of the site. So that means you don't get the staging site. You only have one site, which is the staging and live. Now, if you're just doing a marketing site, that's probably not a big deal. But if you are going to be doing things like functionality and stuff like that, it's usually better to have a staging site you can play on and then a live site, because after we launch our site and it's live, we're going to be wanting to continue to build and add on and do kind of cool stuff with our sites or change around designs, and we don't want to do that on our live site or have to put our live site in maintenance mode. We want to be able to have a staging site. So if you're going to use Flywheel, the tiny package is great for learning. It's great for putting it out there, but it does have limited stats. You can run a marketing site off of this, but again, I even with a marketing site, I wouldn't recommend it. I would say go for the personal plan, which comes with a staging site, which comes with all the other features, comes with the free SSL. They both do, but the tiny plan does not come with a staging site. So I would say if we're going to go with Flywheel, pick up the personal plan at $28 a month. If your budget is really that tight that the difference between 14 and 28 is gonna make a difference, you can get away with using the tiny, but I do recommend that we go for the personal plan. So that is Flywheel. Again, the performance is pretty great. One of the things that is fantastic about Flywheel is they guarantee their security, in the sense that if your website gets hacked, they will fix it. So if the worst happens, because they're handling your security, so they have a guarantee that says if something disastrous happens with your site, they will go in and take care of it for you. But to be honest, they really don't need to, because they take up backups automatically. So you can just go in there and restore your site and you're back to selling donuts within a couple minutes. But if for whatever reason you can't sort that out, or you've freaked out and you can't stop screaming long enough to click the button, then you can email them and they'll sort it out for you. So that is Flywheel. It's WordPress specific host. It's absolutely fantastic. The performance is great. The support is great. And they have this hacker guarantee, free SSL, backups, performance, security. So now we're going to talk about Kinsta. And Kinsta is a bit of our more expensive option. It does start out at $100 a month. But again, like I said in the beginning of this video, we want to get away from the idea that hosting should be cheap, because people that say, oh, these resources are abundant, it should be really cheap, but you're not really paying for the amount of disk space and the amount of bandwidth. What you're paying for is the performance and the security and these other features. WordPress websites very rarely get above a single gigabyte, so them promising you 50 gigabytes or 1,000 gigabytes isn't going to do much for you. When we look at Kinsta, we see that we get 5 gigabytes of SSD storage. SSD is a particular type of hard drive that is it is able to transfer information or load information at a much faster rate than a standard hard drive. But they do start out at $100 a month, but let me tell you why that is. So Kinsta is the dream host. If you're going to be running a business and you're hoping for a lot of traffic, or you're going to be running marketing campaigns that could lead to a lot of traffic, and you want to make sure that your website host is not only going to stay up, but able to handle each visitor with an incredibly fast speed and performance, then Kinsta is the real deal. It is by far faster than the other hosts that we've talked about. Not that they're slow, but when we talk about the importance of a second in loading time, Kinsta is just kills the rest of them. In my experience, I've run speed tests and I've used them, all 3 of them, extensively. And Kinsta, for me, it is worth that price because the performance is noticeable. Even though you look at when you're hosting with these two, you say, oh my God, my website's so fast. And then you go to Kinsta and you realize, oh my God, it's available even if it just loads right up. That's amazing. They also handle your security. They also handle your caching. All of that, of course, comes in with the $100 plan because it starts at $100. They also have that integration with Let's Encrypt. They have the staging and live sites. They have a very easy to use dashboard. And one of the coolest things that I really love about Kinsta versus the other two is that right in your dashboard, you have a chat, and that chat opens up support, and the people on the other end of that support are WordPress experts. I mean, actual WordPress engineers, people who know leagues more than I do, and they can they know not just about WordPress, but also about infrastructure and servers, and they're right there in the chat, and you can just talk to them, and they can usually handle everything right out the bat. So while it is a little bit more pricey to get into, if you're this business is a serious business idea, if your website is for a business that you're hoping is going to become $1 million business, or making you several $100,000 per year, then we want to invest in that infrastructure for our hosting. So Kinsta and Flywheel, as far as the services they offer, are pretty similar. The reason why Kinsta is 3 times more expensive is because the infrastructure is just really that good. They have tremendous engineers on the other side of support. Your page is going to load up incredibly quickly. Their support is going to be willing to work with you to set up any kind of specific things that you might need for your website. They have excellent security, excellent caching. So ignoring everything about budget, if you came to me and asked me what company should I host my website with, I would say, go with Kinsta on top of Google Cloud Platform. They have an amazing service, amazing support. It's absolutely fantastic. The app that you are watching this video on right now is run through Kinsta. And it gives you just a fantastic platform where you're just not going to have to worry about all these things that other people have to worry about. So let's kind of break it down. When we're looking at Pantheon again, this is for our people who are developers or are going to be teaming up with a lot of different developers. Ask them to take a look at Pantheon and ask them to take a look at Kinsta, right? Because if we're hiring developers, I assume that we can kind of have our choice between which one of these two is best. have your developer look at both and see which one they would prefer to work with. Or this is also a great place to learn, but like I said, if we're going to be having a bunch of staging sites we're going to use, let's go with one site on $25, and you can use the other 12 additional slots or however many you get. So that's kind of what Pantheon is great for. Great infrastructure, very, very decent speed, great support, and kind of that environment for development. And then we have Flywheel, which is more of like your standard business WordPress hosting kind of website. With Pantheon, you get kind of not unlimited, but a large amount of staging sites that you can use indefinitely for free or until they stop that particular service. With Flywheel, for every new site, you get 2 weeks that you don't need to pay for it, and then when you go live, you pick the account that you want. They have a great intro price, though I do recommend again that you go for the personal plan, but their support is great as far as handling any issues that might come up. The speed is very good, the performance is great, the security is rock solid. They have a hacker guarantee, and they will kind of help you handle all of the sites that you have and the different updates. And then we have Kinsta, which is kind of the mega option or the strongest option when it comes to speed, performance, security. Absolutely incredible support with real WordPress engineers. Certainly not downplaying the support with Pantheon and Flywheel. Those guys are great. Specifically over at Flywheel, those guys are all, particularly over at Pantheon, those guys are all engineers as well. But with Kinsta, you just have this direct access via chat support with these just incredibly amazing guys that I've talked to over there. So I would say that if you can swing the price, it seems like a lot of money, but realistically, when people talk about hosting and having it be so cheap, it's really not. What it is, it's cheap for websites that are never going to have any traffic, because that's what they're betting on, the fact that they can sell you hosting for $2 a month, because realistically, the people who are looking for that kind of investment aren't going to be able to take the steps necessary to become successful on the internet. And even if they were, the people coming to their site are never going to be able to load it or buy anything or feel secure about it. So hosting, when it comes to solid businesses on the internet, or the websites that turn large profits or bring in lots of visitors, or get linked on Reddit, or want to sell great products and stuff like that, these people are, or even going up to corporations and things like that, or apps like this one, those people can spend several thousands of dollars, $10,000-$15,000 even, on their hosting. So when we're talking about average cost of hosting, yes, there's a lot of people using $2 or $5 a month hosting, but those people are fairly irrelevant when it comes to being a successful business on the internet. At that point, we want to invest a little bit of money into our infrastructure, and all three of these options are going to be great, with Kinsta being at the top, though I do recommend, obviously, that this may be your first website, or you may be focused on learning, or your budget might be really tight. But at that point, I would say figure out a way to increase your income a little bit, so we can go for the best. But if you just can't do Kinsta, then Pantheon or Flywheel are both going to be great options. Which one is best for you depends on what your needs are. Like I said, if you're more on that technical end, or you're going to have technical people helping you, then Pantheon might be a great way to go. If you're just looking for an intro kind of hosting that's going to take care of everything for you, that's a little bit less expensive than Kinsta, maybe not quite as fast and things like that, but still a very great, decent host to start out with, then we can go with this $28 a month over at Flywheel. So I'm going to, that's me basically covering it. I'm going to put some pros and cons lists below this video, as well as some additional information and some of the stuff I've covered in text form, so you can kind of make a quick determination about which one might be best. But really, you can't make a bad choice here. You can only make a better one later on. So, don't be afraid to start with one with the understanding that you might switch to another later. It's very easy nowadays to switch hosts and to migrate sites from one to another. So while this is an important decision, because it affects how your website is going to go for the next couple months, there's no bad options here. They're all great, solid hosts for great prices that offer a great product. And if you're not happy with them for whatever reason, there will be tutorials and a way in our system built in for you to change from X host to Y host, migrate all of your information over. I will walk you all through that. So just try to make the best determination for what your current situation is, knowing that you can change that decision later on. One thing I just want to mention quickly when it comes to Kinsta, where Flywheel you get 2 weeks free, Pantheon you're free until you go live. Kinsta you do have to pay up front, but they have that staging and live environment set up for you right away, and the platform you can start building on right away. You're just not going to have those kind of speed or performance issues that you might have with some other hosts. So, but like I said, none of these are bad options. You can always switch later, and you may be wondering, some of you that may be a little bit more experienced might be saying, why isn't X company on here? Why isn't Y company on here? Like I said, there's a lot of other great hosts out there. There's also a lot of other terrible hosts out there. I wanted to narrow it down to 3 of what I thought were the best options out there for people in various situations. So if you feel very strongly that we should add another host, I can look into that. Just let me know. I can look into it. But if it's fairly similar to one that we already cover, it may not really be worth going on there. But let me know if you have any questions about hosting, or maybe you're not entirely convinced about which one you should use. Go ahead and post in the forums, and I will, or me or somebody else will give you the best advice about which one you should be using.